United States Capitol as part of Donald Trump's desperate attempt to cling to power after losing the 2020 presidential election. That attack lasted only a few hours, but the long shadow of that violent insurrection continues to loom large over American democracy, especially now as the 2024 race heats up. But both the twice impeached, multiply indicted former president and the current duly elected president understand this. That's why January 6th is a central component of each of their presidential campaigns, albeit in vastly different ways. President Biden gave the first major speech of his re-election bid yesterday, and he used it as an opportunity to reflect on how the insurrection exposed Trump's complete disregard for America's constitutional and democratic values and emphasized that the former president remains a danger to democracy.
This is the first national election since January 6th. Insurrection placed a dagger at the throat of American democracy since that moment. We all know who Donald Trump is. The question we have to answer is, who are we? That's what's at stake. Who are we? In the year ahead, as you talk to your family and friends, cast your ballots. The power is in your hands. After all we've been through in our history, from independence to civil war to 2 world wars to a pandemic to insurrection, I refuse to believe that in 2024 we Americans will choose to walk away from what's made us the greatest nation in the history of the world.
In contrast, Donald Trump has gone to great lengths to try to rewrite the history of the insurrection. He said that January 6th was, quote, a beautiful day. He calls the people who've been charged or convicted for storming the Capitol martyrs and hostages. Trump enters the 2024 race both as the undisputed frontrunner for the Republican nomination and as a criminal defendant facing a total of 91 charges in 4 different jurisdictions, including a number of charges related to his role on January the 6th. With recent polling showing a close race between Trump and Biden, there's a very real possibility that an insurrectionist could return to the White House and use the powers of the presidency to exact retribution against his political enemies, as Trump has openly and repeatedly vowed to do. It's a predicament that has given rise to a number of constitutional questions that our justice system has never had to consider because an insurrectionist has never before run for president, nor has a former president ever been charged with a crime. Many of those questions remain unresolved, and they could fundamentally alter the dynamics of this year's elections, with the first-in-the-nation Iowa caucuses just 9 days away. That tension was on full display last night when the Supreme Court of the United States agreed to consider whether Trump is ineligible for Colorado's Republican primary ballot. Last month, Colorado State Supreme Court ruled that the former president should be barred from the ballot because of his actions leading up to and including on the day of the insurrection. The justices are scheduled to hear oral arguments in that case on February the 8th, which is lightning speed by Supreme Court standards. Trump's eligibility to run for office has been challenged in 34 states. It's produced mixed results so far. A number of lawsuits have been dismissed. Others have been pending in the court. The Supreme Court is not only going to decide if Trump may appear on Colorado's primary ballot, but it may determine his eligibility to run in the entire general election. Maine is the only other state so far to rule that Trump is constitutionally disqualified from appearing on the ballot. But due to the unprecedented nature of this entire situation, officials in both Colorado and Maine are operating with great restraint and have put their decisions on hold to allow higher courts to weigh in on the matter. In her decision, Maine's top election official, Secretary of State Shenna Bellows, concluded that, quote, Mr. Trump was aware of the likelihood for violence and at least initially supported its use, given he both encouraged it with incendiary rhetoric and took no timely action to stop it. The weight of the evidence makes clear that Mr. Trump was aware of the tinder laid by his multi-month effort to delegitimize a Democratic election and then chose to light a match. Maine's Secretary of State Shenna Bellows joins me now. Secretary Bellows, thank you for being with us this morning. We appreciate your time.
Good morning, Ali. Thank you for having me.
I want to begin with your decision, the quote that I just read about the conclusion you drew that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. It's not dissimilar to what the Colorado Supreme Court, in a very lengthy decision, underscored. They looked at all the ways you can interpret rebellion and insurrection and determined that Donald Trump had engaged in one. You held a hearing before coming to the decision that you made. I want to just understand for our viewers the process you used to come to the decision to remove Donald Trump from the ballot, at least, if the Supreme Court supports that decision.
Thank you so much. And it's important to understand the process because in this country, what makes us great is we follow the rule of law. And in Maine, because of course, under Article 1 of the Constitution delegates to the states the authority to administer the elections. In Maine, once the Secretary of State qualifies a candidate for the ballot, any registered Maine voter may, within a week, file a challenge to the qualifications of the candidate. And that is predicated on a Maine law that requires and delegates the authority to the Secretary to ensure that every candidate seeking access to the primary ballot meets the qualifications of the office they seek. Once registered Maine voters file a challenge, and in this case, there were 5 voters who did so, I am required under the law to hold an administrative hearing within 5 days, and then within a week of the hearing proceedings to issue a decision. And that initiates the process whereby then any of the parties, the challenger, the candidate, can appeal to Superior Court, and then the Maine Supreme Court, and then the U.S. Supreme Court. And just one more thing, in that hearing, both parties are entitled, and in fact were, to be represented by counsel. So they had attorneys, they can present evidence, witnesses, engage in cross-examination and legal argument. So that's our process here in Maine.
Tell me, one of the things that NBC talked to you about in the past, after this discussion about the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment started to float, was all of you secretaries of state who run elections across the country were conscious of the fact that any decision you take will be challenged in other courts, in your state Supreme Courts and the Supreme Court of the United States. How did that influence your decision making, understanding that this was not a routine decision for you? This is possibly one of the most consequential decisions you and other secretaries of state will ever make in the history of this country.
This is the process. This is the rule of law under the oath that I swore to uphold the Constitution. And so on the last page of my decision, I voluntarily suspended the effect of my decision pending appeal to the Superior Court, and indeed welcomed this U.S. Supreme Court engaging, because our job as election officials isn't to make the laws. Our job is to follow the law, no matter where the law takes us, and to do as the courts direct. And so that is what we will do under the law and the Constitution, which is the only consideration we can have.
Wait, and I noticed that you said this a few times, so that's where you have decided you're going to be, what you're going to be driven by. There are differing opinions in the United States. Even in your own state, it's elicited mixed reactions, even among the Democratic representatives. Congressman Jared Golden said, quote, "I voted to impeach Donald Trump for his role in the January 6th insurrection. I do not believe he should be reelected as president of the United States. However, we are a nation of laws. Therefore, until he is actually found guilty of the crime of insurrection, he should be allowed on the ballot." Now, Congressman Shelley Pingree, also of Maine, said, quote, "The text of the 14th Amendment is clear. No person who engaged in an insurrection against the government can ever again serve in elected office. Our Constitution is the very bedrock of America, and our laws, and it appears Trump's actions, are prohibited by the Constitution." The crux of the debate, I guess I want to ask you about, is 2 parts. One is, do you think that Donald Trump has sufficiently been, that it's been litigated that he was involved in an insurrection? And number 2, do you believe that this is ultimately a political decision or a legal decision?
My decision is a legal decision under the Constitution that I swore to uphold. And I think that's really important. And, you know, in my decision, it's 34 pages. People can read it on the Secretary of State's website. I make it very clear that the decision would have been clearer should there have been a conviction or a guilty or not guilty verdict in a criminal court of law. But that's not what Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says. It says engage in an insurrection. And the events of January 6th were tragic, unprecedented. They were an attack, not only in the Capitol, but also on members of Congress, on the former vice president, and resulted in 7 deaths, but it was also an attack on the peaceful transfer of power and on the rule of law. And the weight of the evidence demonstrated that Mr. Trump, these events happened at the behest of the outgoing president and with the knowledge and support of the outgoing president. And the U.S. Constitution does not tolerate an assault on the peaceful transfer of power. And furthermore, my job as Secretary of State in Maine, as delegated to me by the Maine legislature, is to ensure all of the qualifications. So I cannot place an 18-year-old on the ballot or a non-citizen running for president on the ballot or someone who's violated the 22nd Amendment. I couldn't place Barack Obama or George W. Bush on the ballot. I must ensure that all candidates meet the qualifications of the ballot. And the qualifications in the Constitution are not a menu. They are the requirements under our founding document.
They're not a menu. Important note that it is a disqualification. It's not a penalty. I'm a Canadian who has become an American citizen, so you couldn't put me on the ballot. That wouldn't mean that there's anything wrong with anything I did. I don't meet the qualifications.
I cannot. With all due respect, Ali, I cannot place you on the Maine ballot.
We're neighbors. It's all good. It's all good. Shanna Bellows is the Secretary of State for Maine. Thank you for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
In our next hour, I'm going to talk to Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold on the heels of the Supreme Court's decision to hear arguments about whether Donald Trump is ineligible to be Colorado's Republican primary candidate. Still ahead, the images of the January 6th riot are some of the most recognizable in our nation's history, sadly. We've all seen the deeply unsettling videos of Trump supporters attacking the Capitol. And 3 years later, believe it or not, we're still getting new perspectives. This dramatic new video, released as trial evidence, shows what it was like from a rioter's vantage point. You're looking at the Republican Representative Troy Nehls. You're going to see him in a second. I'm going to wait till we see him. Okay, we don't really see him, but you'll see him in a second. He's trying to reason with the dangerous mob through the broken window of the main House chamber door as a police officer stands by with his guns drawn.
I've been in law enforcement in Texas for 30 years.
Talk a little louder. That's because you've never seen corruption like we have seen this last month.
I'm ashamed.
And I'm ashamed of my Congress people. They don't even stand up for it.
Man,
They're giving away my grandchildren and your grandchildren's freedom.
hey, you need to back up.
Freedom is at hand. Go find another door, everybody.
Do you understand we're fighting for you?
You ought to put the guns down. We're not going to do anything.
A new lawsuit in Pennsylvania is aiming to ban the Republican Congressman Scott Perry from appearing on the state's primary ballot using the same insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment that's been used against the former President Donald Trump. The 7-page lawsuit asks a Pennsylvania court to declare that Perry is ineligible to run for office because of his efforts to keep Donald Trump in power. The filing states, quote, the effort to utilize the fake elector certificates to overturn the certification process and invalidate a constitution process was an effort to subvert the Constitution for insurrection purposes. And whether one participated directly in the insurrection's efforts or if one supports the insurrection's efforts, the 14th Amendment, Section 3 disqualification provision applies. In this case, it applies to Scott Perry, end quote. Now, here's a refresher on how Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania got wrapped up in all of this. It was revealed during the January 6th House committee hearings that Perry tried to use the Department of Justice to help Trump install a potential acting attorney general who would be more receptive to Trump's false election fraud claims in order to stall the certification of the election. And while Donald Trump may be the main character of the story of January 6th, Congressman Scott Perry is a reminder that Trump did not work alone in his attempts to topple democracy. He had an army of supporters physically tearing apart our nation's Capitol. But inside the Capitol, and after the smoke cleared, a group of Republicans, and this is where your glasses come in, all but justified the actions of the rioters and played their own role in blocking the peaceful transfer of power. And here they are. These are the 147 Republicans in the House and the Senate who voted to overturn Donald Trump's election loss. At 8 p.m. on January the 6th, after the mob had been cleared, Congress reconvened to officially certify the results of the election, the very process the insurrectionists were trying to stop. And these 147 Republicans voted against the certification because of the baseless voter fraud claims spread by Donald Trump and his minions, including Scott Perry. Almost every single one of these 147 people are still serving in Congress. And no matter what happens in the 2024 presidential election, just remember, these lawmakers who tried to overturn democracy will still be running our government. One of the lawmakers who has worked to protect democracy since January 6th is the Representative Stacey Plaskett. The day after the insurrection, she released a statement saying, quote, "In this country governed by the people and formed in objection to tyranny, there is no place for the autocratic tendencies we have witnessed," end quote. 3 years later, that statement is truer than ever. I'll speak with Representative Stacey Plaskett. Of men and women in Washington, D.C. heeded the call of duty to protect the United States Capitol and the lawmakers inside from a dangerous pro-Trump mob. One of the individuals who risked his life and rose to the occasion that day is Eugene Goodman. The 15-year veteran of the Capitol Police Force and Iraq War veteran arrived at Capitol Hill at 5 o'clock in the morning on January the 6th. He'd been assigned to the Capitol Rotunda to guard the path that senators and members of the House would follow as they moved through the building to certify the results of the 2020 election. By the time he got to work, pro-Trump protesters were already en masse near the Capitol in anticipation of what would become an infamous speech by Donald Trump at the Ellipse. Later, things took a turn. Violence began to unfold, and Goodman took one of the first arrests of the day to a police transport vehicle. After that, he returned to the west side of the Capitol, where what he called a medieval battle was taking place between protesters and an overwhelmed police force. Eugene Goodman didn't hesitate. He joined his comrades. Goodman was then hit in the face with bear spray and then inadvertently got caught in a cloud of tear gas deployed by law enforcement, causing him to run inside the Capitol to throw up. When he returned outside, he saw a crowd of what looked like thousands climbing the scaffolding and scaling the Capitol exterior. Then he overheard that the Senate side of the rotunda had been breached. Goodman ran back inside to protect who he could. One of the people he protected, you can see the video here, was Senator Mitt Romney. As you can see here, Goodman, in this now famous video, told Romney to run the other way, just as the mob broke through. The rioters kept coming, and now the mob was inside the building. Goodman recalled in later testimony that the rioters antagonized him. Here he is. They antagonized him with questions like, "Where the F are the members at?" before a man jabbed him with a Confederate flag. At this point, Goodman was on his own. He said the Capitol Police radio system was working poorly. He had a mob of rioters demanding he move because they wanted to pay the Senate a visit. In this video shot by Igor Bobik of the Huffington Post, Goodman tries to get the mob to back up. Undeterred, they keep at it. They force him up the stairs. At the same time, Goodman is actively luring them away from the Senate chamber. He knows that's where they want to go, and he knows that there are lawmakers in there. As the mob reaches the next floor, more Capitol Police officers are there waiting for them to help round them up. Eugene Goodman stayed at the Capitol past midnight that day, sweeping the building for rioters who were still hiding. He helped clean it up. And for his heroics, he earned a Congressional Gold Medal on January 6th of last year. President Biden presented Officer Goodman with the Presidential Citizens Medal, the nation's second highest civilian honor. For many Americans, the attack on the Capitol on January 6th was first unthinkable, then it became a shocking spectacle, and now overblown, according to those who helped perpetuate it. But for people like Eugene Goodman, it was a real visceral threat with lasting consequences. A black police officer who served his country overseas, who worked at the very center of American government, had to fight off a mob stoked by hatred intent on subverting the democratic will of the American people, being poked with a Confederate flag. Battles over democracy can seem abstract and philosophical and even detached from the real world. But the truth is that when people attack democracy, someone has to defend it. And those very real people on the front lines risk everything, their safety and their well-being and their lives and their privacy, because it is worth just that much. Joining me now is another person who was at the Capitol on January 6th and fought to protect our democracy and nation from that very real threat. The Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands is a member of the House Judiciary Committee. She serves on the House Select Committee on the weaponization of the federal government. She also served as a House manager, helping prosecute the case against Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial. Representative Plaskett, it's good to see you again. You and I have talked many, many times long before these days, but since then. And one of the roles you played as an impeachment manager was to walk us through some of what I just showed our viewers. Walk us through exactly what happened that day from every angle. You've seen every shot of this. You've seen every video camera. And Eugene Goodman tells a lot of the story here. There was a mob that was destined to attack the Capitol and invoke violence on people. And this man fought it in the moment. And I just mean symbolically, it is important for us to remember on this third anniversary that there are lots of people in America in different roles who did what this man did. But he put his life on the line.
Yes, thank you so much, and Happy New Year to you and to all your viewers. It is, a very moving day, January 6th. A very close college classmate sent a picture of me that 9 years ago on January 6th, I was sworn into Congress, thinking that Congress was going to be a place where individuals from both sides of the aisles work together, may not always agree philosophically on issues, but working towards the betterment of the people of the United States, to the American citizens, and, I stand as a beacon for the world. And how far have we fallen in the 3 years, or even before that, with the culmination of hatred and division in the election of Donald Trump, and then him calling those individuals through their frustrations, their bigotry, their racism, their hatred, to descend on the Capitol and try and overthrow our democracy. Goodwin stands as a symbol of those who put their life on the line. I also, Ali, think about the other video that I showed during that time of the staffers who were huddled, young people huddled into a room as people were banging on the door trying to get in. These are 20-year-old, 30-year-olds who give up lucrative jobs other places. Government doesn't pay that much, and do what they can because they believe in this country. And to have their lives threatened, or other members, I think about my colleagues who were up in the gallery. Some of them still have real mental issues, emotional issues from that day, as they were left up there because there was no easy access, no secret access to get them out there. And they had to wait and wade through people that the Capitol Police were holding down at gunpoint so that they could get through and get to safety. Those are the things that happened on January 6th. And what is absolutely infuriating, Ali, is those individuals who say it was not what it was the attempted overthrow of this country, the attempted throwing off of all of our rules and our norms, which are here to protect us. How many people from the civil rights movement followed the law and fought peaceably through the courts, through other systems, through demonstration for what they want? And for those individuals to think that they can do whatever they want because they don't like the outcome of decisions is absolutely untenable in this republic that we live in.
One of the points you've made as somebody who we relied upon to see all these videos and talk to these witnesses, and as you and I talked about the January 6th committee, one of the points you made is that we don't need more video. We don't need any more witnesses. We've all got two eyes. We've seen everything we need to see. You said we need more senators with spines, not more witnesses. And that still stands, right? We need more elected politicians who will take the right decisions. We have all the evidence in the world. If 25% of Americans still don't believe what happened on January 6th or don't believe Donald Trump was responsible, whatever the numbers are, we can't help them. What we can do is have our decision makers like you and your colleagues, the elected decision makers in this country, make the right decisions.
Yes, during the trial, I was the only person in the impeachment team and one of the few Democrats who actually served in a Republican administration, who was at one point a registered Republican before I turned and looked around and saw that the Republican Party had left me and I was no longer a member of the party in terms of where they were going to the right. And I remember, you know, it's a strange feeling, Ali, if you've been a courtroom lawyer, to actually talk to witnesses, to talk to the jurors while you are presenting your case. But that's what we did. And I can recall going over to Republican senators, some of whom I actually worked for on the House side as a staffer in many years before, and saying, what do you think? And they're like, you've made your case. And saying, so you're going to vote with us? And they're like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And to think, Ali, that we would not be where we are today if they had done that. My plea to them was vote to convict him. We need 2/3 to convict him, but we only need a majority after that conviction to disqualify him from ever being able to run again. And we can do that. We will do that if you give us the votes to convict. But they were unwilling and afraid of the base, afraid of Donald Trump to do that. And we are where we are now.
And they continue to be. Congressman, you have never been. Congresswoman, thank you for the work that you've done. Thanks always for being a friend to our show. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett.
Thank you. And may I say to all Virgin Islanders right now, Ali, today we are celebrating Crucian Christmas Festival, and you are missing outside of my office right now. The parade is coming down the road. Feathers, madras, everything, and I'm about to hit the road right now and have fun.
I love that.
Despite all of the bad things that are going on, there's still good in our community.
We have to, yes, we have to celebrate. I've told you one day you and I will do an interview in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Come on down.
Great to see you. And congratulations, by the way, on your 9th anniversary as a member of Congress, the Representative Stacey Plaskett of the United States Virgin Islands. All right, still ahead. We've repeatedly said that democracy is on the line in this upcoming election, but many parts of our democracy have already been eroded. A Trump re-election is just going to make it worse. The question remains, can Democrats rise to the occasion to stop it? Our coverage of the 3rd anniversary of the January 6th insurrection in just a moment. First, I want to tell you some exciting news. Starting next week, there will be a new weekend lineup here on MSNBC. Starting next Saturday, you can kick off your weekend with a brand new morning show. Simone Sanders-Townsend, Michael Steele, and Alicia Menendez are teaming up to bring you The Weekend, which premieres next Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern. You continue to catch Velshi in our normal time slot, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern. After that, the Katie Fang Show moves to a new time slot at noon Eastern on Saturdays, followed by Alex Witt, and then the Best of the Beat with Ari Melber, Politics Nation with Rev Al Sharpton, and then Jonathan Capehart, and the evening rounds out with Eamon, who's like Prince, just has one name. Okay, on Sundays, it's different. Inside with Jen Psaki joins the lineup right after Velshi at noon. Again, the new lineup gets started next Saturday. You're watching Velshi right now, always on 10 a.m. to noon Eastern on Saturday and Sunday. We'll be right back. Donald Trump announced his intention to seek the presidency for a 3rd time. A constant refrain has been that democracy is on the line in the next election. But the truth is that democracy has already suffered blows in recent years with a gradual erosion of democratic norms that's been normalized by the far right. The MAGA assault is striking at our democratic foundations from all angles, local and federal, from judicial overreach and constant book bans to attacks on civil liberties, diversity programs, and abortion rights. According to the Guttmacher Institute, abortion is now essentially banned in 14 states, while the future of abortion remains uncertain in a handful of others. Access to abortion clinics is cut off across much of the South and the Midwest. Meanwhile, book bans are escalating in schools and public libraries throughout the United States, resulting in a 20% increase in book challenges in 2023 compared to the previous year, according to the American Library Association. From 2021 through August of 2023, conservatives launched an all-out war on critical race theory, CRT, passing nearly 750 anti-CRT measures, according to UCLA School of Law. Attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, continue to have their impact on higher education and other institutions across the country. Anti-DEI initiatives have passed in at least 6 states, with faculty reporting a chilling effect on teaching and recruitment. These represent just a few assaults on our liberal institutions and fundamental rights. All of these efforts reflect a Republican Party that has learned to effectively harness its base to push for these draconian measures. In contrast, the Democratic Party has struggled to harness its own constituency and develop a coherent strategy to confront these challenges. And concerns persist that Democrats are not effectively countering these assaults on democracy. Despite Donald Trump facing 91 criminal counts across 4 indictments, Biden could very well lose to Trump. Biden is seeing considerable declines in support among young and minority voters. Most national polling shows Biden in a dead heat with Trump. These numbers serve as a clear indication that Democrats do need to step up their efforts or risk handing the presidency to Donald Trump, who has vowed to unleash revenge and retribution, his words, if reelected. All of this comes at a time when 2024 stands out to be the biggest global election year in history. More than 60 countries, roughly 4 billion people, half the world's population, heading to the polls for national elections this year. Experts warn that there is a real risk that many of those elections will choose leaderships with anti-democratic leanings.